Welcome to another episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Our co-hosts, Sri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage with consumers online, in-store, and everywhere in between. And now, here are Sri and Peter.
Welcome, folks, again to the CPG Guys podcast. It's Sri and PVSP, and today's episode is to celebrate Women's Month on the CPG Guys. Every November, we feature women executives in the CPG industry from large brands, retail, and startups alike. We're proud that for the third year in a row, we will be doing this. Peter, man, wow, what a month. We're honored so many female leaders have joined us for this month. And how are you doing, buddy?
Well, I'm doing quite well, Sri. This is as important a cause to me as it is to you, I know. We live in households that are populated by females. I know how important your mother is in your life as my mother is in mine. I watched my mother rise the corporate ladder and face a whole lot of challenges around gender equality that were absurd and unnecessary. And I promised myself when I was an adult that I would do my share as an ally to help break down some of those barriers. So I'm really excited to talk about Women's Month today and to feature really fearless and successful women, entrepreneurs, business leaders that are showing how women can succeed in the corporate world and do so despite some of the unnecessary obstacles that have been put in their place. So I'm happy to be partnering with you to make sure that breaks down. I know we've got some really big news around that soon.
No debate about that, Peter. Without my mom and my wife's sacrifices over the years, I would not be where I am. And I know it's no different for you as well, Peter. But you just said you've got something to announce. So tell us about the special partnership we are establishing from January 2023 to actually celebrate Women's Month on the CPG Guys.
Yeah, so Sri, we've decided to become formal partners at the supporter level of Next Up, formerly known as Network of Executive Women. You know how we promote Next Up on all our episodes. We talk about how important it is, but we thought it had to be more than just talking about it. We wanted to make a financial contribution to help support this incredibly worthy cause of trying to advance gender equality in the workplace. Starting in January 2023, we will sponsor individual memberships for corporate female leaders and entrepreneurs to be part of Next Up so that they can leverage everything from learning development programs, the opportunity to attend regional and national events, and all sorts of live and virtual speaking engagements. We're very excited about this. We've got about 50 memberships that we're going to allocate out to a lot of great entrepreneurs. I think the first one we selected was unanimous between the two of us, Sri. We wanted to offer it up to our dear friend Katie Holtz from Grocery Shoppy, so she'll be the first one. I think we've got a couple more in mind, but we want to do it to people who might not be able to afford the corporate membership, but could dramatically use the allyship, the power of the network, and all the resources that Next Up brings. So if you want to know more about Next Up, Sri and I encourage you, go to nextupisnow.org/CPG Guys and learn more about this incredible networking organization and educational resources and trying to change the culture that we live in to ensure that women can advance in the corporate workplace. So very exciting time for us, Sri. I know you and I talked about this for quite a lot over the last couple of months and landed on this being exactly the right thing for us to do. I couldn't be more happy to do this, Sri.
No doubt, Peter. I'm grateful, thankful, as well as honored to have your allyship in this journey with me as the CPG Guys. Peter and I are committed to gender equality. We will not back down, and we want to do our part so that we can partner with female leaders in the startup space as well as in corporate leadership and get you working with Next Up Is Now, especially if your company does not sponsor it today. But hopefully that may change in the future, and we encourage brands, retailers alike to check out nextupisnow.org/CPG Guys, as Peter just said, and learn more about this great group. So, Peter, thank you for that. But before we get to our guests, let me remind our audience that all of our content can be found by visiting cpgguys.com on a browser. The website, of course, is brand new, has rich content and episodes that are actually organized into themes like retail media and loyalty. If you aren't already joining us on LinkedIn and you haven't followed us yet, please do so because you'll join 17,000 plus other industry professionals on an entertaining educational journey. Also, we are managing closed groups on LinkedIn, such as CPG, e-commerce, retail media professionals, and there may be others in the future. Over 1,000 plus professionals are already part of this, so please consider doing so yourself. We are also on other social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Check out our series on Knowledge Drops, which is intended to be a fun way to learn about our industry. You can find it easily on many of those platforms by simply searching for CPG Guys Knowledge Drop in the search box. Remember to check out our friends, the FMCG Guys podcast, hosted by our friends Daniel and Efrain. They take the CPG Guys podcast format across the pond, and they speak to retail and FMCG luminaries from a European perspective. All you have to do in a browser is visit fmcgguys.com and check out the latest addition to our family, the CPG Scoop, hosted by Jennifer and Riza, two close friends of the podcast. They actually conduct snackable conversations with industry veterans. It's a fun way to discover what's new and next in CPG commerce and marketing. Visit cpgscoop.com to learn more. Today's episode focuses on digital leadership and consumer experiences for brands. Here to speak with us about all of this is Diana Haussling, a second-time guest of the CPG Guys. She is VP and GM of Consumer Experience and Growth at Colgate-Palmolive. I cannot wait to get this dialogue started and engage Diana as we decompose talent and skills, P&L in an omnichannel world, and leading transformation. So please join Peter and me in welcoming to the podcast, Diana Haussling. Diana, how are you?
I'm fantastic. So thank you so much for including me in this awesome month featuring some badass ladies in the CPG industry. It wouldn't be Diana on the CPG Guys if I did not make a Beyonce reference. So who rules the world? Girls. So thank you for having us, and thank you for including me in this cool month of ladies.
You don't need to tell us who rules the world. Shri is in a household with, let me count it, 5 females, and I'm in a household with 3. So we understand the pecking order in this world, and we're okay with that.
Nice.
Before we get to the questions Peter and I have prepared for our conversation, Diana, would you please provide our audience with a brief overview of Colgate-Palmolive and your role there?
Thanks. Well, Colgate-Palmolive, I'm not even going to go that deep because we're one of the number one brands in the entire world. So not only do we feature and sell a breadth and a depth of oral care brands, but we also have awesome home care and personal care items like Irish Spring, Fabuloso, which is one of my favorites, Ajax, and a myriad of other items that really just help make our consumers' lives that much easier, more enjoyable when it comes to Fabuloso smells so fabulously. So what I do, what I'm charged on, and I'm responsible for leading our consumer experience and growth team. It's an awesome group of individuals focused on pillars that really are geared around centering ourselves with the consumer and ensuring that we deliver a delightful experience, whether it's through integrated marketing, our digital commerce team, D2C, insights, analytics, or revenue management. They're all interconnected, and we leverage all of the strengths across our teams to deliver that delightful experience.
Thank you for that. We'll include links to your LinkedIn profile and the Colgate-Palmolive site in the digital liner notes of this podcast episode. So let's get ready to rumble. And why don't we get the conversation started? I'll kick it off with the first question. This, of course, Diana, is your second appearance on the podcast, so welcome back. You've spent your career working with several consumer goods companies across categories and being on both sides of sales and marketing. So tell us more about your entire career journey and what advice you have for others seeking a similar journey of leadership that you have embodied.
So I'd love to say that my career decisions was some type of strategic move. It wasn't. A lot of it was happenstance. But as I look in the rearview mirror, the things I can say that really helped define my career and allow me to get and have the experiences that I've had thus far is that I was able to get depth in areas that really mattered, like operational experience, marketing skill sets, customer knowledge, and also get breadth by working across multiple different retailers, multiple different categories, and understand not just on working on the Walmarts of the world or working on the big brands like Goldfish, but really working on things like canned chicken. And brands that, may not be top of mind, that require a level of skill sets and sophistication that you don't get when you work on some of those powerhouse brands. So for me, as I think about my career journey, I've really focused on experiences. So how do I get experiences that enabled me to really position myself and be more competitive in the marketplace? So what I always tell folks is don't focus on the box, focus on the experience. So how do you think about the experiences that you need to eventually ascend to those various roles? And some of those experiences are going to be lateral, but most of them will allow you to grow. If you want to take the traditional route, that's great. But what's really been, the architect of my career is that I haven't taken that traditional route, and those experiences and that differentiation has allowed me that not only the knowledge and skill set, but the ability to lead multiple functions that seem very different if you look at them holistically. But once you actually understand the connection points, and if you've had that experience, you're able to really drive growth because you understand them. Couple of things that I would note, especially, being a Black woman navigating, a corporate environment that was not designed for people like me to be successful in. It's important to not only get mentorships. Women of color are typically overly mentored. It's more important and critical to get sponsorships. Sponsors are the people, those are the individuals that are giving you the projects. They're giving you the job. They're fighting for you to get that pay raise. They're also the ones that are allowing you to get the experiences that enable you to grow your career. The second most important thing is to make sure you get that P&L and operational experience. The closer you are to operations, the closer you are to the P&L, the more valuable you are as you move up within organizations. And then the final piece of advice that I always give folks, but especially women of color, but especially Black women, is know your value and your worth. You don't have to be fixed in. You don't have to put up with it. You don't have to take it. Leave when the environment doesn't allow you to be yourself. Leave when the environment doesn't value the unique skill set that you bring to the table, and especially leave if they don't pay you.
Well said, Diana.
I look at myself, and especially as a Black woman, that now has a seat at these tables that weren't designed for me. Part of my privilege is to ensure that I'm making space for underrepresented groups. I'm making space for talent that may not be identified, that I'm ensuring that I know the talent within my organization and in other places so that I can help uplift them, and really so I can be part of changing those systems that really do a phenomenal job of making it difficult for a lot of individuals to add value. And at the end of the day, we all know this. That makes it more challenging for companies, especially big companies like the ones I've worked for, to be successful in this type of environment and this type of consumer makeup, where more of the people are starting to be diverse or in interracial marriages or have different sexual orientations. Companies cannot stay relevant. Companies will not be able to effectively speak to consumers if they don't have that diversity in their offices, in their boardrooms, but more importantly, at the leadership level.
Diana, welcome back to the CPG Guys podcast. If you haven't heard Diana's first episode with us that took place earlier this year, I highly recommend you listen to it. It is the second most downloaded episode in our history, and I fully expect Diana to be able to take over the number one spot. Diana, there's a tremendous amount of transformation going on. We've seen rapid omni-channel growth. Digital commerce has been explosive. But since the pandemic has subsided, we've gone back to living relatively normal lives. My question to you is, where is the balance between the extremes of omni-channel kind of settling out? Is omni-channel growth now plateaued, or is there still room to grow on the digital side of the equation? Would really like to get your perspective on that.
I'm smiling right now because I feel like this is like the hot question that every single person in digital commerce is grappling with right now. And, everybody is like, the internet is dead. Everyone's going back into stores. And the reality is that, the growth that we were seeing during the pandemic of 200% was not sustainable, and it would not allow for incremental business growth. What we're focused on is making the pie bigger, not shifting people from brick and mortar to digital commerce. That's not a sustainable business model. What the pandemic actually did was democratize digital commerce. So that changes the game and how we have to think about it. Previously, I feel like a lot of organizations thought about, well, it's either this consumer is brick and mortar or they're digital commerce. Well, now we're all very complicated and promiscuous. So consumers go back and forth from either being in digital channels, or they go into the store, or while they're in the store, they're even buying something to get shipped to their home that they don't see. So because of that, it's for me, for larger CPG organizations, it's a little bit more intimidating because you've lost your foothold of owning that planogram. So now not only are you competing with, your competitive set within the aisle, there's also more opportunity for brands that are smaller that may not have the sizable budgets to be competitive. So as consumers are shifting back and forth across the different modalities, bigger brands have a harder job to do to make sure they maintain them when they go click and collect or they go pure play. And if they do go in those channels and they end up trying something else, what if they like it? And they keep buying it, and then they start buying it in brick and mortar. So I think, what I've been talking about in this space is it's not declining, it's normalized. We're still seeing double-digit growth rates. This is actually faster than we saw before the pandemic. It's just not growing at a crazy clip that wasn't realistic and wasn't actually incremental. So brands have to now think less about, do I lean into digital or do I lean into brick and mortar? It is a digital world, and it's both. If you are a brand that sells today, you sell digitally. And if you are not enabling yourself for that environment, you are going to miss out on opportunities. And it's not just about your marketing and sales. If you take a step back and look at all the work that Walmart's doing in their logistics in their back room, and all of the work that a lot of the grocery retailers are doing as well too, if you're not thinking about your packaging and how it can go through automated systems, if you're not really thinking about your consumer and how they now have access to digital commerce, it used to be something that was just for those of, wealth. Now it's for anyone, and anyone's going on it, which is why you're seeing a high growth in private label. Brands really have to think about, they want to be and delight their consumers however and whatever they choose to shop, and be prepared for what could be coming in the future.
Diana, tell us a little bit more about how organizations these days think about attracting, developing, and retaining talent. Everyone is chasing hard to come by digital talent, where the pool is actually becoming bigger, but so is the competition. What are your thoughts here?
So let's first start with the brand. I think for us, we are really designing our teams to enable us to go after that question, like what if they like it? So how do we think about driving loyalty with the consumers we have now, making it so they will walk away before they choose another brand over our products, because we're just really, not only are we delivering on what the brand promises, but we're actually anticipating their needs by leveraging data and insights to either develop an innovation that serves a need that they didn't have, or creating an experience, a bundle that really makes it easier for their life, so they want to stay connected with us. Then it's a question of, if they buy something else and they like it, acquiring that consumer back costs that much more money. So it's really expensive to do that. So first, you got to nail the first thing right, really lean into your loyals. When it comes to getting those consumer back, really digging into the data and understanding what is the difference, what is the driver, and understanding put the human back in this work and leverage that to drive your strategy. And then it's really important to put the consumer at everything. We spend a lot of times talking to ourselves and our acronyms and our CPG and our funnels, but really when you put the consumer first and you listen to them, that's where the real magic happens, and that's how you're able to engage. So then you asked me that tricky question about talent. I think for all of us, we're grappling in a time frame where we're reevaluating what it means to go back to work. but we're also in an environment where talent is extremely competitive. I say first and foremost, think about your talent internally. We're spending a lot of time focusing on that external talent when internally, that same person that's sitting in that seat doing that work, if they were to go interview somewhere else, would they get more money? Would they get a bigger title? What are you doing to nurture the valuable talent that you have inside? Because it's very expensive to bring people in. It's very expensive to have people leave. So I would start there first. Don't neglect the people that you have in the room with you. Then when it comes to the competitive nature of talent, it really is about making sure your talent feels good and valued so they don't leave. And then the folks that, may have done their time and had a great journey, it's time for them to move on, that you create that lasting experience for them as well too, so that they're still connected and engaged with your brand and can be advocates wherever they go. And then for the external talent to be competitive, I think it's really about understanding what you stand for and who you're trying to attract. For me, I mentioned a lot of things about, how I think about career, but I'm looking at your board of directors. I'm looking at your leadership team. And if you don't have people that look like me, then you're not going to get me, because you've already demonstrated to me that I can't be successful in your organization. So representation, before you even go out there and trying to get the talent, make sure that you have that representation so that people feel like they can grow within your organization. Then it's reassessing exactly what you need for your culture. If you're an organization that is 100, 200 years old and has an established way of doing it, going and hiring a bunch of folks that are much more vetted or much more seasoned in entrepreneurial spaces and not creating an environment that sets them up for success is just not ideal. You have to understand your culture. And if you're going to go after that talent, you have to create an ecosystem that allows them to be successful. And I think the other thing we're all rethinking is when talent needs to be remote versus when they need to be in the office. And, I've spent a lot of time with my HR partners really working through that. So it's not just hey, we want butts and seats. It's really about the type of work that they're doing. Does it require a level of collaboration that needs them in the office? Or if it's something like potentially search or content creation, is it something that they may be able to do in a remote location because it's so challenging to get talent, that we're able to find that right talent in a market that may not exist? I think the last thing for me is really using all your offices in a cool way. Like I've created a little part of my team that's sitting in Bentonville. And what I love about that is as we partner with Walmart, they're right there, but they're also working across other customers and categories in the digital commerce space. So that's really exciting for us. But no one, I think, has solved this. You really have to understand what works for your culture and then create a value proposition, that makes talent want to come to you, and create that pipeline so you have, folks that can really fit within your succession plan, but you also have a network externally that you can pull from.
Upskilling your existing workforce is a great way to build out your talent without having to go out and accumulate a lot of hired guns. So when you start thinking about the people that you want to upskill, what are kind of the soft skills that you tend to value the most in developing this high-performing team, and how do you train your teams against soft skills as opposed to more perfunctory kind of functional work around actual tasks?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of us are going through that right now. And I specifically for the marketing talent, but this really is for anyone. I find the biggest opportunity that we have, especially in the a lot of the technical and the tech heavy dynamics of a lot of the work that we're having to do right now, is having them truly understand how to unlock the potential and impact of subject matter experts. And that really requires an understanding of how to connect with people, but also how to provide crystal clear direction without, becoming, an order, somebody that's just positioning them as cheeseburger order takers. You want fries with that, you want ketchup, you want tomato. Really positioning the subject matter experts to do their best work. And really what that means is leaning on, our ability to really craft strong business questions. And it's something that we don't really talk about a lot, but if you can't develop a strong business question or a challenge, it's really hard for a subject matter expert to deliver their best work. So it's not necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily consider it a soft skill, but it's an undervalued, under-focused skill that is actually, to me, going to be the unlock for some great work. A lot of the analysis that we need, a lot of the, diagnostic will not be able to happen without those really strong crystallized business questions that allow our SMEs to do their thing and do it well.
So the question now arises, Peter, are the CPG guys merely butts in seats and are we cheeseburger order takers? Something new I learned today. But let me remind our audience that
I don't think we are, Shri, because you're right off the top, you're a vegetarian. So unless it's beyond meat or impossible, you're not just taking those orders.
No, it wasn't about who's consuming, it was about who's taking the order.
Oh, okay, I see.
I'm capable of taking the order. So let me remind our audience.
You don't take any orders from me, I can tell you that much.
That's because I take it at home here from the 5 women in my life.
I know. You and me both.
Let me remind the audience that we're speaking with Diana Haussling, VP of Consumer Experience and Growth at Colgate-Palmolive. So we're going to get into a little bit more deeper on how Omnichannel works at very large brands. So planning cycles. Both you and I, Diana, have been through many of them in our lives for different brands we have represented. Do today's company planning cycles really work on omnichannel growth, and the P&Ls, are they seen as one and the same? And how does one plan for what we saw last 1 or 4 weeks?
Yeah, I think with the inflationary pressures and all the things going on in the world, we're not able to, we actually had somewhat of a quiet period, if you think about that on the world stage. And we're starting to see a lot of the volatility that was experienced many decades ago. And I think adjusting to the fact that your models are not going to be able to predict all of the things that are happening, that they need to be directionally sound, and shifting from models and having one plan to scenario plannings. So what if this? What if that happens? What will we do? How will we pivot? And getting your teams comfortable to that what if scenario planning so that they don't have to uproot everything and start over from scratch. So I think that's another one of those skill sets more and more we've got to get folks comfortable with, so that when the thing happens, it's not like an oh shit moment. It really just becomes like, yeah, we have a plan for that, or we thought through what that could be. It also gets your teams really agile and start to do some predictive planning and really start to think about, how we can work differently in spaces. I think the pandemic showed us that we can do that. So now we just have to put it into practice and make it a skill set that folks do on a regular basis. When it comes to our P&L management, I hope my finance friends still love me after this, but we are still in our archaic time where we view P&Ls the way we did 20, 30 years ago. It lacks the flexibility that we need and the nimbleness for the digital commerce space, and now for the evolving integrated media space to move with the agility that they need and across brands. I'm lucky enough to have some really cool finance partners that are willing to break the rules and do things a little bit differently and come up with solutions. But I think that's an area ripe for revamp and revitalization, especially as more and more we're competing with these startups that don't have those same constraints. The other thing I would think about is our customers are starting to adapt new revenue streams. The pressure on the P&L is shifting, and how we approach above the line, below the line, how we think about total cost to serve for our retailers is going to have to shift, so that not only can we grow and have the margins that we need, but also we're supporting their objectives. This is a mutually beneficial relationship between retailers. And it's important for us to work on this together. And I know for Shri, in your past, you've been able to do this with a lot of retailers, and it continues to evolve for both of us. I think the last piece for a lot of manufacturers is really having the ability to have a direct connection to your consumer. That does not mean that our retail partners are not critical to our business. They are, and they're always going to be a priority. But that direct relationship allows us to add additional value and really streamline efficiencies when it comes to our retail partners, so that we get the learnings and we're able to narrow down and simplify how we execute with them, because it's very complicated. But then it also allows us as manufacturers to get knowledge, insights, generate loyalty with consumers in a way that enables our brands to not only be healthy, but sustainable and grow.
Diana, I want to go back to the topic of sponsorship, which we covered to a degree earlier. To the people that are listening to this podcast, how would you encourage men and women leaders alike to lean in around sponsorship and elevating women in the corporate workplace?
All I can think about is don't just talk about it, be about it. So I look at allyship as an active verb. And, for me, we spend a lot of time having listening sessions and talking, and there's a lot of words, but I want to see action. Make the space for the person. Stop the meeting if the person isn't there. I have an awesome leader in my organization that has done that and sets that example. If the idea is being repeated by somebody else, call it out. So be that active verb of an ally in those situations. And then when it comes to sponsorship, really lean in and think about, how do I create these opportunities and make time and space for individuals that have the potential. You don't just have to do, it's not a charity case. The people that you're investing in are going to be the future of the organization. They're actually going to be the reason why you make more money and get your bonus. So it is not a selfless act to invest in this talent. And then I say for the women, it's really critical to understand your value. My dad always says that the title belongs to the company, but the money is yours. So make sure you're getting what you're worth and you're negotiating, whether it's an external offer or even an internal offer. You have to understand and be tuned into the network so you understand your value, so you can continue to build generational wealth. Generational wealth that was not afforded to some people, especially people who look like me, because of slavery and other things. So it's important that we think about those things and we're knowledgeable about them if we want to rebuild them in our communities and as a community as a whole. I think the other thing that's very critical is to make sure you get that title. Make sure that you have the title and you push for, whether it's director, VP, senior manager, that you're getting called the thing, because it enables you to get a stronger job someplace else. It enables you to get the influence and power that you need to be successful in the role you're in within the organization. And it also allows you to feel valued. And all of those things are critical and important to how you perform.
Speaking of generational wealth, it's a topic we probably should discuss on the CPG Guys at some point, because I couldn't agree more with you. Not everybody has been afforded the luxury of understanding what that means over several decades and spans of lineage, etc. But I'm going to go to capabilities. Can you give us what would be, in your mind and your learning experience, what would be your number one pick for the top capability for a CPG brand to drive omnichannel growth in today's times? Remember, the world has swung around a whole lot. We had this abnormal growth rate for e-com, and now it's plateaued, but it's still the highest growth amongst any channel that exists. And then there's a role a service provider has here, because the entire industry molded pretty well in the last decade on the backbones of service and tool providers. Is that all they are, or are they actually helping companies make money?
So I'd say first, what is that one thing that's critical? It's integration. We talked about that a little bit before. This us versus them, brick and mortar versus omni, versus e-commerce. Omni means everything. If you don't have one strategy, if you have digital marketers over here and then marketers over here and no one's really thinking about it holistically, that is where I feel like it's really going to break down, and brands are really not going to be able to be competitive for a long time. Now, you have to know where you are in the journey. So there's a time where, hey, because we lack the knowledge, we need that separation for depth, but making sure there's integration. If you do have to separate the roles for depth, that integration is going to be critical, because you need to have one strategy. mentioned this earlier, but making the pie bigger. If the digital commerce team is fighting to hit a number and all you're doing is trading people back and forth, you're not making the pie bigger. So if you're not working together to say, how do we grow? And how do we grow not just incrementally, because sometimes digital commerce is not incremental, it's mitigating loss. But how do we maintain our position and grow by leveraging both? And what does that look like for us? And then having a clear roadmap in 5 to 10 years as things shift and become more complicated, preparing your brands so that there's this awesome consumer experience regardless of how folks want to shop. And then I think the last part of your question was around, what was the last part of your question?
The role of vendors, the last decade or so, service providers have shaped it.
Yeah, so, Peter, you know this all too well. If your vendors are just your vendors and it's a transactional relationship, especially in the CPG space, in the digital space, you are not getting the most of your money. I have found that my vendor partners add tremendous value to our strategy and how we think about our business, because day in and day out, they are really deep in their tools, they're really deep in their systems, and they have a perspective that we don't have because they're looking across the categories. So it's important to get their knowledge. I onboard my vendors with our strat plan every single year and give them updates throughout, because once they understand the strategy and what I'm trying to do, they typically proactively bring me ideas, and oftentimes they're not even trying to sell me something. It's really like, have you thought about this? Or based off of what you're doing, can you do this? If you start treating them like parts of your team, what you unlock, the value that you get from that spend is tenfold. I think the other thing I found with the vendor community is that they are a ridiculous source of talent. So, and it's not just about poaching from their teams, because I typically won't do that because then I'll lose my partner there. But if you tell them you have an open role, they usually know like 25 people, and they can set, and they know if they're good or bad because they work with them. So I find them to be the best recruiters in the business. So typically when I have an open role, I go to them and they already have like 4 or 5 names. And not only do they have the names, but they're like, hey, this person's looking for a new experience, because you get to a point with your vendors that you're so close to them that they actually kind of not only understand what the person's looking for, but actually where they would thrive in the kind of cultures and environments. So it's a great way to get talent as well too. But I'm hard on my vendor community. I'm hard on my partners because I expect quality output, but I also treat them like they're a part of my team. And right back at me, they challenge us in the same way. And the ones that do that the best are probably the ones that I value the most.
I've worked in corporate environments where vendors were treated almost as if they were the enemy, that information was not shared, that vendors were expected to guess the answer, and if they guessed wrong, they would be punished. I always thought that was antithetical to growth and harmony. So I'm glad to hear
not
that
a psychologically safe environment.
Your vendors in.
Yeah, you got to bring them in.
Well, unfortunately, there are too many companies with a legacy of behavior like that that doesn't permit them to grow the way they should by building truly meaningful partnerships. That being said, Dan, I want to shift into direct-to-consumer. In your prior role, you were integrally involved in Colgate's D2C activities.
I still have D2C.
My question for you is this. There you go. Okay. So then I would ask you this, because you have this perspective. Obviously, in the age of FBA aggregators and Amazon millionaires and billionaires, these digitally native brands have scaled and done very well. My question for you is this. For scaled brick and mortar, well-penetrated retail distribution brands, is D2C a must-have? What are the reasons that these kind of brands should, or in some cases should not, be considering D2C as a new channel for selling?
I think D2C is a must-have if you have the infrastructure set up to allow you to do that, or the partnership set up to allow you to do that. And the reason why it's so critical is because it allows you to have that one-to-one connection with your consumer. And why is that important? So first, you want to be able to build loyalty. You need to understand what that means and what that means to your consumer. Consumers are also expecting a personalized experience, whether it's on D2C or someplace else, and that's where you gain the knowledge. So if you think about from a strategic standpoint, how can you leverage D2C for your CRM strategy? How do you leverage D2C to enable you to understand your consumer better? How do you leverage it to really think about your innovation strategy and your pipeline there? And how do you leverage it to really think about your media planning and audiences and how you think holistically about that consumer and shopper journey? And getting that firsthand knowledge allows you to not only improve your product, but it also allows you to improve how you execute in a traditional environment as well too. There's another element to D2C too, which is the revenue driving element. It allows you to incubate innovation, launch items quickly, test and fail fast. I often, partner with retailers in some things in D2C just so we could do it quicker because we all operate with really big ships, that don't allow us to move that nimbly. But if I go to my D2C site, we can do a lot of things, test it out, and then go run with it. So I do think it's just an opportunity for you to really connect with consumers, leverage data for strategy, and while having a revenue stream. When should you not do D2C? So if you don't have the supply chain infrastructure or your supply chain is already strained, I wouldn't add this additional strain on it. There's third-party partners that you can work with. You can focus on your 3P strategy. There's other things to do before you should jump into D2C. Your tech stack, your MarTech stack has to be in place. Your website functionality has to be in place. Your UX and site design has to be in place to enable you to do this. And so those are things you want to make sure you have right before you jump into that. And then the last piece, which is critical, is your portfolio strategy. Typically, when you're selling things on D2C, bundles or higher price items are really what you need to order to make the unit economics work. So if you're not able to do those things well, it's going to become very challenging for you to execute in those spaces. And then the holy grail of all of that is personalization. So how do I get the curated box that is right for me? And that is just the next phase in the D2C journey.
I knew Diana would have the eloquent answer to this question that we've kind of debated so many times on the CPG guys. So let me close it with I know you've been waiting for me to ask you this question, which is, given the last 2 years and all the digital omnichannel lean-in that's happened in the CPG industry in the US and worldwide, what's Diana's advice for brands going forward, and is the store trip really returning?
I don't think the store trip ever went away. I think consumers weren't able to do it, but it never went away. And, I'm a person, even though I've worked so long in digital commerce, I love to walk around the grocery store and kind of be surprised and delighted by things. But I also love the convenience and the experience shopping on my phone. So I'm always going to do both. And I think in this environment, we have to think about that there is an element of convenience and access that makes digital commerce critical to us as humans and our survival, but there's always going to be a role that the physical store plays. So if brands want to be relevant in today's environment, you have to be prepared to be sold everywhere. And that doesn't mean that every brand that you had is sold in every market. If you think about your portfolio roles, your price pack architecture, you really start to get to that nuanced, detailed work around what items do you sell where and when and at what price point and how. And that is the evolution. You're not going to see anymore every single item in the portfolio being sold at every single fulfillment model, every single channel. That's what all of these different channels, whether it's D2C, click and collect, traditional brick and mortar, all of these environments are allowing for that level of diversification, but also simplification. So when you go into a shop, when you go into a store, you're no longer going to be overwhelmed. You get that curated experience. So the most critical thing is actually data and analytics. Because in order to get to that, you have to really understand not only what the consumer wants today, but what they're going to want tomorrow and 10 years from now. And that's what I'm really excited about. The journey that data and analytics and advanced analytics enables us to really be that much stronger of marketers, of business people, of partners, and of brands, so that consumers get the experiences that they want, but the products that they want, when they want it, and where they want it.
Well said, Diana. Let me remind our audience, all of our content can be found easily by going to a browser and typing cpgguys.com. And of course, if you think you or your company has some thought leadership to contribute to our community discussion, drop us an email, easy@contact@cpgguys.com. Again, email goes to contact@cpgguys.com, and maybe you can actually join us on the podcast. Don't forget to leave us a rating at cpgguys.com on the navigation bar up top. Your rating helps us know how well we're doing and whether we got the right set of guests and the right topics on this podcast. Thank you to the over 16,500 followers on LinkedIn. We really appreciate the love you've shown us for the CPG Guys and the growth spurt we've had in calendar year 2022. It's November. I'm looking forward to an awesome 2023 as well. Diana, I can't thank you enough for coming back to the show a second time. So sincerely, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Always a delight.
Mr. Bond, it's that time, which means you get to summarize. I wish you were, I know you were taking copious notes over here because Diana had so much to share. I don't know how you're going to get into a summary, but let's do it, man.
I've got 52 bullet points. I'll try and curate efficiently. Everyone on the team needs to be focused on delivering a delightful experience to consumers. That's going to create cohesion, and it's going to drive growth. From a career development standpoint, don't avoid trying to work on the smaller brands because they can help you build up experiences that really develop competitive skills. And that means sometimes you take a lateral move to build those critical experiences. But look for the opportunity to lead multiple functions, particularly when you get P&L and operations experiences. And as you're doing that, don't just seek mentors, seek sponsors, people who will advocate for you, not just answer the questions and give you some guidance. And most importantly, know your value. When you know your value, you're able to articulate it and to a degree, demand that you are advanced because you have earned that right. Also, pay it forward. It's a privilege that you're given this opportunity. Make sure that as you go up the ladder, you reach down and bring people up on the process. I heard Diana say very clearly the pandemic, what was most interesting about it is helped to democratize the digital commerce experience for so many. We've created this generation now of hybrid promiscuous shoppers. And what happens as a result of that is brands are off balance because they're not able to control the traditional physical shelf planogram as easily on the digital shelf. While growth is still happening, it's normalizing, so there is no waning of digital commerce. It's just that it's now back to the kind of growth rate that we saw prior to the pandemic, but it is in fact growing. What this means is that going forward, brands have to be equally adept at both physical and digital experience and marketing. And underpinning both of those is a command of supply chain. It's core capability in the digital world. If you're not capable of doing that, then you're not going to succeed in an omni-channel environment. And what's happened as a result of the pandemic is people are trying new products, be it because of supply chain constraints, a number of different issues, and particularly with the current state of the economy, there's a concern about private label growth. And what happens if they try it and they actually like it? It is really hard to get back a consumer who has switched to private label after the fact. So you should be focused on developing innovation that it either addresses a consumer need or improves the overall consumer experience. And that means having the consumer at the center of all the decisions you make. When it comes to talent, it's a very competitive environment. Don't just look to hire people from the outside. You're not going to find enough of them, and it's going to be too competitive. Focus on upskilling. the people that you already have and nurture valuable talent to keep them within the ranks, so you don't have to go and spend an inordinate amount of money going to find other people, and try to build representative teams that fit into the culture of the organization. And understand, if you're going to hire remotely, is the work that you are asking them to do conducive to productivity in a remote environment? Or do you need to be in an office environment or where you're collaborating very in real time amongst people? Is that's what's required? If you don't get it right, you're not going to get the productivity you seek. And the best thing you need to do as you start thinking about building high-performing teams is really try to unlock the potential of subject matter experts. It requires clear direction, and it also means that you have to craft very strong business questions or challenges to get that productivity out of the subject matter experts, and focus on the community outcomes in order to do that. And as you yourself are looking to advance in the company, make sure you're getting the title that comes with the responsibility, because that's going to enable you to both advance your career and demand the resources that particular role is entitled to. A couple other things I'll just mention. From a direct-to-consumer perspective, brands that have the supply chain infrastructure, it's an imperative. You should be involved in it. It is a great way to create a personalized customer experience, and it can help inform your media plan and audience targeting outside of D2C, because you're really dealing with consumers that are fans of your brand. It's a great environment to incubate innovation, but of course, if you don't have the MarTech stack to support it, D2C is not going to succeed. And I would lastly say data and analytics are going to deliver the meaningful personalization experience. So if data and analytics are not underpinning your strategy, then you're probably not going to succeed. That would be my my very short summary of Diana's great commentary in this episode.
I think the summary is testimony to the level and quantity of the outcomes we got on this episode and the quality power punches we got on this episode. So thank you for doing that summary, Peter. Let me thank our audience for listening in to us. We will see you soon on another episode of the CPG Guys. We're grateful Diana joined us for Women's Month 2022. See you soon.
The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.